Welcome to the Pulse WV Live, a network that beats to the heart of God. I'm your host, John Fowler, and also with us today is Pastor Jay Mace as we discuss part 19. You and John Sandy are like, I think you're in competition on how long you can carry out a series because John's really like that too. It's like, here's 422, you know. But anyway, really enjoying that series. Do me a favor and download the app, the Pulse WV Live app, and you can get it on the Google Store for the Android, or also at the what is it for Apple? Is that just a?
I think it's Apple Store.
Apple Store, yeah. You can go to the Apple Store. App Store.
Yeah.
Go to the App Store and download the Pulse WV Live, and be sure to give us a ranking and also tell your friends about it, because it gives you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, music and preaching that is some of the best preaching and teaching this side of heaven, and I know you'll enjoy it.
Give us a good rating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Don't give us a bad rating.
Yeah,
God will get you if you do.
He will. He'll give you the wide eye. I remember Jack Cart used to.
Jack Cart. I remember that.
You do?
Yep.
Jack Cart used to say, "I'm gonna pray the wide eye on you."
I remember that. Oh man, that brings a rush of memories back,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, traveling around on that bus. Lord have mercy.
I didn't do it nearly as much as you did it, but there was some crazy weekends.
There's on Facebook the other day. They were showing a picture of a bus that had a name called Samson, and they said, "Does anybody know whose bus this was?" And Tim Surratt, who used to be with the Kingsmen, he said, "I've been on that bus many a times." And when he traveled with the Kingsmen, that was their bus.
Yeah.
And it was one of those 45-foot buses that you couldn't take at that point into California. So they always had to, but I mean, it was one of the big ones. And I love traveling on a bus. Tim Morris bought a bus.
Did he?
Yeah, he bought an Eagle, got a real cheap deal on it. And it actually is a nice bus. And I wanted to go in half on him, but he wouldn't do it. He just wanted to own it. He told me, he says, "But you can borrow it any time you want to."
Nice.
Yeah, so I thought that would be good. So what's going on in the world of Winfield Pulse?
Well, trying to get our drywall finished and trying to get everything lined out for Bible school, which starts in less than 2 weeks at this point. And then following that, we made the announcement, the official announcement this past Sunday. We've been teasing a save the date for it, but we are hosting the Make Marriages Magnificent Conference.
Yes.
With Dr. Gerald Pingleton, who we met at the Ignite Conference, and who works there at the school as well as Liberty University in the Lynchburg area, and just a phenomenal man. And I told the church Sunday when we gave the full details on it and put the event page out on Facebook, you and I almost didn't go to that session because we signed up late for the session. So we kind of just got what was available, and we got thrown into the marriage session.
Yeah.
And we're thinking, we've been married 30 years. Let's go drink coffee or something instead. And so we almost didn't go. And the last minute, it was kind of like, no, I think we need to go.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal.
Very good.
Phenomenal. Awesome. He just did an amazing job. Compelled me so much to reach out to him. Had great conversations with him over the phone and over email and text. And so we have set up this conference. It's going to be August 18th, 19th, and 20th. It'll be the Friday evening on a few hours, and then all day Saturday, and then he will be preaching our Sunday morning message that day. So we are excited, and I don't know about you, but I see it all over my Facebook. I see it all over the church. I've got a number of people reaching out to me asking for help. Marriages are in distress.
Yes.
In this country, and we've gone through some things in our church. There are no secrets. I'm not talking about anyone, but we have seen the attack that the enemy is putting on marriages, and I believe, John, I firmly believe it is Satan's last stand.
Yeah,
I believe he has a hold on everything else, and his goal now is to tear down marriages.
Yeah.
In his last stand, to take as many as he can to hell with him. And and so there was so much of this that after we went to that conference, heard the things that he had to say, and I mean things I needed to hear.
You're very good. I learned some things.
Not that I'm perfect, but I think Sam and I have overcome a lot in our marriage, and and have come to a good place. But there were still things I needed to hear, and everything. And I'm thinking, if I need to hear this stuff, then this person who's single, begging for a wife, needs to hear it. This person whose marriage is crumbling needs to hear it. These people who are engaged and getting ready to start a family together in the church need to hear it.
Yes.
And everything else. So if I needed to hear it, there's tons of other people who aren't in as good of a place as I am in my marriage who need to hear it.
Yeah.
And it just really started burning with me. And then several things happened, several marriages, families in distress that we know. And I just talked with our leaders, and I was like, it's time we start fighting back. And, I'm not going to sit back and take this. And so I reached out to Dr. Pingleton. He tells me to call him Jared every time I say that. But I reached out to him. We had amazing conversations back and forth for about a week.
That's awesome.
And we put it in stone. So we are beyond excited. We're going to do a better promo video for it and a lot of things. But the information's already out there, so I just wanted to hit that real quick since you asked and say that we're excited. There will be a small registration fee that is to cover his expenses. It's, he's not asking for a buttload of money, man. He's coming cheap.
Right.
I was shocked at what he was willing to do it for. And so we just want to cover his expenses. And then we'll be putting some food and stuff together for Friday evening and for Saturday lunch.
Wow.
And so, the charges is basically just to cover those expenses. And so it won't be very much at all. And we want you committed. We want you committed to being there. And if we say free, everyone's going to sign up. But at the last minute, they don't have any dollars on the table.
Right.
So they're just going to be like, we can blow this off and do nothing. While, you don't receive the knowledge and the instruction that you need to receive. So we want you to be committed. We want you to come. And we're making it affordable, and we're just excited.
That's exciting. I remember Pastor Jay back probably 15 years ago. It may have been about 15 years ago. I remember Christy and I were not in a good place in our marriage. Ministry had really beat up on us good at that point, and we just were not at a good spot. And so she had heard of a marriage seminar down in Myrtle Beach. And this is wintertime, so, I mean, it's not like we were on the beach all weekend. And we went to the seminar, a marriage seminar. It was 2 days. And we did so much writing. She would write, I would write, and then we would, there's times she would be gone at the hotel room and she's writing. There's times that I would write, and then we would go back and we would read what we read to each other. And there's many times that I'm sitting there writing and tears are just running down my eyes.
Sure.
There were times that, I would read to her, what I wrote, because there were times that we had to do that. And there was just times that you were just weeping because you were just broken. And that healed our marriage in a miraculous way like you would never believe. Here was the neat thing about it. And I'm being transparent here because, we've been married 34 years. But we've the key to it is, and I think this is one of the things that people don't realize, is they're so prideful that they don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah. Well,
we got to that place where we just felt like we needed, help. And so here was the amazing part of that. After the whole weekend, and they get down to the end of it, they tell us, and this is something that I recommend for this. Each couple that was signed up for the marriage event had an intercessor couple all weekend. There was somebody that was praying for Christy and I
Mm.
all weekend.
That's powerful. Yeah.
And then they gave us the contact information of people that were praying for us.
Wow.
So we were able to reach out to them,
Wow.
and they reached out to us. And I just get chills when I tell it.
Sure.
And these people weren't around that area.
Right.
These people all over the world,
Right.
and they were praying for Christy and me.
That's phenomenal.
And I
Yep.
just think that if we can, because I know you're big on intercession, everything that's been in Promise Keepers, you've always been a part of that.
Yep.
And so if once we figure out everybody who's signed up, if we can find an intercessor for that couple to pray all weekend,
That's fabulous.
man, that
Yep.
would be like so cool.
Yep.
But and God healed our marriage,
Wonderful.
and God restored us, and because we were in a tough spot.
Yep.
And but the first thing that you have to do is if you're thinking about signing up for this, what do you call it? What's the name of it?
Making marriages magnificent.
Making marriages magnificent. If you sign up for that and you say, well, I don't want to sign up for that because people will think that we're having marital trouble. Don't worry about that part.
Well, but it's not even that. I mean, this is open to singles.
Right.
It's open to people who are engaged and not yet married. I mean,
It's not about
what
things
he's
that are
really
bad.
doing. Yeah, no, and you don't have to have a bad marriage to come.
Right.
We want. I don't. If you're 18 years old and just out of high school, and want a marriage that's godly magnificent one day, if that's next year or 10 years from now, you need to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're really doing is, and his book outlines this beautifully, because I've read his book since the conference, and what it really does is it shows us the godly design of marriage and the godly design of the roles of marriage, and how if we do it by God's design, then everyone is edified,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is honored, and everyone becomes blessed
All right.
by God. Therefore, the marriage becomes blessed, and that doesn't even come close to breaking it down on the level that he breaks it down on. But that's what we need to understand. And there's a lot of people, and we're gonna push this really hard. There are a lot of people out in this world who get married and never understand the godly design of it.
Right.
And so if you're single and you hear this, you need to be there more
that's
than
good.
anyone, because you need to understand before you ever say I do
Yeah.
what God's design for you is in this. And the power, when we do it God's way, the power that we have to overcome the stuff. Because
Yeah.
there's always going to be stuff.
Yeah.
Sam and I have been married almost 30 years. We still deal with stuff. And add the ministry on top of that, we deal with even more stuff and everything. But, putting all of that aside, your average couple is always going to deal with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning before you get there
Yes.
how to approach it and how to deal with it will make your marriage magnificent. And we're excited. This is a fight back for us. This is us as saying, okay, Satan, you knocked us down the first few rounds, but we're coming back on fire. So,
Absolutely.
we're excited to see what God's going to do with it.
I've always been so fascinated with and so respectfully just learned so much from you and Sam on your family and raising your boys, and just how wonderful both of them are. And I mean, I absolutely just think that you and Sam are just top notch when it comes to marriage and it comes to raising your boys. And I know that you and Dr. James Dobson have had many conversations.
We have indeed, and Jesus in there too. But yeah, I mean, we could spend. I know you have some big questions you said for me, but
oh yeah, this is good.
I could spend the next.
Tell them you can't make it for a couple hours.
I could spend the next hour talking about that, but we got pregnant 3 months in. And I was like, holy crap, I'm not ready for this. So I went and read just about anything Dobson had ever written, and read it again and read it again. And we're not perfect by any means, but we made our center Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Always. And, the boys would sometimes ask, well, why do we go to church? No one else goes to church on Wednesday nights, or no one else does this, or no one else does that. And my response was always, because this is who we are.
Yes.
And we just made it a banner over our lives to be those Christians and those servants that always went the extra mile. When it came to the Lord, and I'm not saying it was easy, but thankful that our boys bought in, thankful that they're strong in the Lord, thankful that they're touching lives.
Yes.
In what they do every day at the, Luke teaching and coaching at the high school and middle school level, Isaac working at Camp Appalachia, and touching lives there as well as in our programs at the church. So we're just thankful.
Yes, it's awesome things having your children side by side with you in ministry, and I think that's just an awesome thing. As we get into, these are questions today that I'm asking. If I was sitting in your congregation, which I do when I listen, and it's just like I'm virtually sitting there, and I'm thinking, as somebody who I respect, I'm thinking, okay, I don't understand this. I need to know. I need to dig a little deeper, because I always ask that question. You're looking at me real funny.
I'm just waiting.
And so this absolutely really doesn't have anything to do with your sermon, but it's something that you read within the sermon. And so I just thought I would get this one out of the way too. Okay, so if you look at John chapter 11,
mm-hmm.
and which is where you've been, we're talking about Lazarus. And so one of the questions that I have to learn from you on it's in here twice. It's in verse 33, and it's also in verse 38. It said this. It says, "When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled." Then if you look at verse 38, just a couple down, Jesus therefore again groaning in himself cometh to the grave, and it was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. When you think of the way we are in the world today, and with what's going on, as we continue into Jesus Together, part 19, what does groaning represent in this scripture, and then how do we relate it to today?
Wow. I know the answer. I just need to think of how to put it into words.
Well, let me give you another scripture while you do
without offending, because I think you're spot on, John, and I think you are. Did I mess up the picture because I leaned back instead of sitting forward?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Can I read one more scripture before?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Romans chapter 8:26 references this scripture, or what I was just asking. "Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for we ought, but the Spirit itself making intercession for us with groaning which cannot be uttered." So there's a scripture that backs up John chapter 11. So
yep. And for those who weren't at church on Sunday, this was not part of my message, but may play into where we're going this week. Here's what I think was going on in that moment, and I hit on this a little bit Sunday, and I hope with God's help to hit on it more this week, because this is a big chapter. There's a lot happening.
There
here,
is
a lot to break down. So I think this will be our fourth week on chapter 11 coming up, but that's okay, because we're not in any rush on this, and I've been dedicated to it. The other people that speak in our church are probably like, when are we going to get to speak and everything? But I just feel really focused on this because I think it's needful. Let's remember. Let's go back to the beginning. we started this series in the beginning because I was distressed, and I felt like a lot of the church were operating in a sense of religion and operating in a sense of morality and not really grabbing hold of the ministry of Jesus Christ. And, we all talk about power, and we all talk about gifts, and we all talk about all of the things that were promised in multiple places in Scripture. So those are there. Those are promises. Those are absolutes. And I don't care what your denomination is, you can't argue those things. If you believe any jot or tittle of Scripture, then you have to believe those too, right? But you have to understand how you get to those places and how the power manifests itself in you, right? Because if not, we can confuse emotion with power. We can confuse energy with power. We can confuse theatrics with power, right? And we've seen those mistakes in the church for years. And so I wanted to present the ministry of Christ to the church this year as a coming out call to the church, right? It's time, not saying you're not saved, but I am saying that you don't understand Jesus very well, right? And so we have to do better at that. John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, right? The Word was God, right? So from the beginning of John, we're told, here's Jesus. He exemplifies 100% the Word, meaning he 100% exemplifies the Father.
Yes.
Right? So he is God.
Yes.
In the flesh. Later on in John 1, it tells us, I can't remember the verse off my head, but later on in chapter 1, it tells us, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
All right.
Right? So what does that mean? It means from that point forward, we're told Jesus is our authoritative, godly, omnipotent, omniscient, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-doing God. Right?
Yeah.
Jesus is our authoritative example in the flesh of who God is and what God intends for our life. So what's basically God saying to us there? He's saying, watch him, learn from him, follow him, and allow him to rule your life. Become like him, right? And so we don't become like him in morality, right? We don't become like him in religion. We become like him in relationship, and we hear that all the time. It's not a religion; it's a relationship, right? Well, if I'm a new Christian, or if I'm a sinner, right? Well, what the heck does that mean, right? You want me to have a relationship with a dead guy? You want me to have a relationship with someone in heaven that I don't see? So I don't ever understand how non-believers and non, even unfounded Christians, people, by unfounded I mean not present in the Word, Christians who don't understand the workings of the Spirit. I'm getting to your question.
No, you're good.
Who don't understand the workings of the Spirit, how do they ever understand the whole religion thing and relationship thing? How do they get that? Because what they see is what they get, right?
Yeah.
So I'm watching John Fowler,
All right.
right? And John Fowler's this type of Christian. So now I'm doing the things I see John do. I'm doing the things I see John preach. I'm doing the things that I have seen an example of. And that's the kind of Christian I become, right?
Gotcha.
So we start following what we see, right? Rather than the authoritative example of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And so ultimately, we are in a place where we need to forget everything and everyone else and focus on Jesus only.
All right.
Right? For us to get Jesus right, we have to focus on on Jesus. And so The Chosen does a really good job of this. But it presents the tension between Jesus and his disciples and between the religion of the day very well. And you say, well, those are his disciples. Why was there tension? Because they were John Fowler Christians. They were J. Mace Christians. They were, whoever's name you want to throw out there, Christians, because they were following and imitating those examples.
Gotcha.
Now the authoritative example comes, right? Now the word in the flesh comes. And it says, no. Follow me this way. Think like this. Talk like this. Do these things. Don't do these things, right? And it becomes a rub, especially to the Jews. It becomes a rub to what they had seen, what they had practiced, and to what largely made up their lifestyle. And everyone is kind of in a place where this is not what I know. This is not what I think. This is not how I feel. This is not how mom and dad did it. This is not how the church I was raised in did it. This is not how the world does it.
Right.
And now you're giving me something that you say is better, and the only example I have of that is you.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and when we start talking about relationship, that's what we're talking about. Jesus is not just inviting us on a journey, but he's inviting us on a spiritual journey inside of ourselves.
Right.
With him. So when we come to this moment in John 11, where Martha and Mary and the crowd are weeping and grieving and hurting, and in this moment where Jesus knows he's bringing Lazarus back to the earth, right? Where do we know Lazarus is?
We know him to be in the tomb.
He's in the tomb physically.
And it would be in paradise.
And he spiritually is in paradise with Jesus. Now, forget everything else, because, there's a million different theologies and arguments on what paradise is and where paradise is and everything else. Here's what we know.
It's over on the other side of Red House.
Here's what we know. It's with Jesus. It is the final chapter of having that intimate relationship with Jesus.
Right.
Right? It is the culmination of all that we've worked for and all that we've done. We're with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
It's good.
Jesus, here in John 11, in his conversations with Martha and Mary approached him very differently. Both of them approached him very differently. In his conversations with them, he made it very clear to them, you're not with me.
Wow.
You believe in me, right? You walk with me. You understand my power, but you don't understand where it is I'm asking you to go.
That's good.
Right? And that is the crux, in my opinion, that is the crux of the groanings. I think Jesus is grieved for two reasons. I believe he's grieved because those closest to him don't understand the next depth. And this happens a lot in churches, and it happens a lot in Christianity, that we step into a level that requires so much self-denial and requires so much relent on our part to the fullness of God and the fullness of who Jesus is. And what do? We take a step back. We take a step back. What did Jesus say ultimately to both of them? I'm paraphrasing big time, but what did Jesus say to Martha and Mary? Both. I'm the resurrection, right?
Right.
Right? You believe in me? Do you understand where I'm asking you to go in this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm asking you to believe in this? I am the resurrection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a tomorrow thing. It's not a next week, next year thing. The physical event might happen next week, next year, right? 10 years, whatever. But in your presence, I am the resurrection, right? And if you believe in me, you won't see death. And I need you to believe that about your brother. Because if you don't believe it about your brother, you're never going to believe it about yourself.
That's good.
Right? So I believe Jesus is grieved because Martha and Mary haven't arrived on that level yet.
They didn't have a clue, did they?
They weren't ready to step into that depth.
Yeah.
They weren't there. Good people going to paradise themselves if they died.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All the boxes checked.
Yeah.
But he was asking them to go to a deeper place, a deeper relationship with him than they had conceived in their heart or in their head. So I believe he was grieved. Then I believe he was extra grieved at the tomb because he knew where he was bringing Lazarus back from.
Mm.
I believe he was present with Lazarus while yet in the body. He was present with Lazarus in that place in such a way that in his spirit he was grieved that he had to bring someone back to this earth.
Wow.
Because and you know it was absolutely a spiritual thing because these groanings are spiritual things.
Right.
You know, this isn't us just whining around having a pity party.
Yeah, because it says he groaned in the spirit.
In the spirit. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yep,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
good.
So these aren't just pity party groanings. These are just spiritual level groanings of, they don't get it. I need them to step into this, right? And then there's that absolute remorse of, I can't believe he's there. And I have to bring him back to this. And this level of thinking and this level of doing and this level of tension and contrition and everything. So I think it was two parts.
Right.
And I think he was grieved at the lack of depth in Martha and Mary as well as everybody else present. And I believed he was grieved in himself that he was going to have to do the unthinkable and bring somebody back.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that he was also at a place where he was interceding over the doubt and unbelief of those people that were around him? Do you think there was any interceding that was going on there because he felt that? And where he felt it, I mean, you know as well as I do, you've prayed for people in crowds, and you knew there were people that were doubting that were out there, and you know he would have had to feel that. This is a big thing, bringing back somebody from the dead. You know, that's a big thing. And so I'm wondering if the Romans chapter 8 that I read, verse 26, talk about the Spirit intercedes for us. I wonder if there's another part to that, to where Jesus was interceding over the doubt and the unbelief of those people that were around. Yeah. And he was grieved by it.
Verse 41 and 42. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by. Wow. The answer to your question, yes, he was interceding. Absolutely, he was interceding. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me.
That's so good.
And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth.
There's another sermon. Hope you all have a good day. That's so awesome. Shoo. That's good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's powerful. 4 days. Significance of that. I had to back it up, you know, because you were talking about the 4-day significance of why Lazarus was in the tomb and what the custom was, that their spirit actually hovers around that area for 4 days, and I want to give
For
you
3 days.
for 3 days. Yeah, 3 days.
4 days was significant because the belief was there's no hope of resurrection
after the third day. After third day.
So.
Isn't it amazing? Jesus raised on the third day.
Yeah.
Now, all this is okay. So let me give you a situation here, and I believe that, and let me tell you why. When my mom passed away, we went back to after she passed away. She wasn't sick. Her heart just quit, and she died, and they couldn't get her back. So we all went back to the house, to Mom and Dad's house, and I made breakfast for everybody, and I literally felt my mom's presence so much in that kitchen. Now you can say that you were grieving and you were all. I mean, we've been doing this a long time. You and I have been in the same room where people died. We've been there, and so I had my wits about me, but I knew that woman's spirit was in that room. Mm-hmm. She was in that kitchen with me, I can't. If you held a gun to my head and said you deny that, I can't. Mm. And I almost turned around and looked at her. I mean, I almost turned around and said, "Hand me a paper towel." Mm. I mean, that's how. And so, the second time, I felt her 3 times. The other time was in my office at the house. I was working on the funeral. And I mean, how, not that your mom stinks, but everybody has a smell,
right.
And I've just felt her, while I was working on the sermon. And then the third time was Lindsay, our daughter, was going to sing during the funeral. And I was sitting over playing the piano, and she was rehearsing one of the songs. And I felt her again. And after that, I remember driving to the service, which was at Harding's Funeral Home up in Canal City. And I remember crossing the St. Albans Bridge going on the interstate. Remember, it was cold. It was in January. It was snowing. It was just a really miserable, cold day. Mm. And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me. And he spoke to me. He says, "I've allowed you to feel your mom's presence 3 times. He says, "You won't ever feel her again." Mm. He says, "There's no time for you to grieve. I have a work for you to do." And he told me that. Mm. I don't doubt that. Anything that I've told you, I know happened. So when you read that, when you talked about that on Sunday, I said, yes, that is true. The significance of that. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Yes. Wow. So many different, I hate to call them stories, but happenings. But yes, I have, when my mom died, she died quickly. She died suddenly. They tried to resuscitate her. They came to me and said that, what was going on. They were trying to resuscitate her, and I asked them to take me to her, and they refused. And I remember the guy saying to me, "You don't want to see this." Anyway, I said, I have no fear of what I'm going to see. I just want to be there. Right. And they forbid me that. And so once they cleaned things up and everything, I went back and was with her. And I sat down by the bed and held her hand and just remembered so many things. For those maybe listening that don't know, and I'm not going to go into the depths of it, but Mom was a single parent until I was 13. And so for 13 years, it was just us. And it was very much an us against the world kind of scenario. And I remember her saying to me, and you can say it was in my head, you can say whatever. I'm like you. I believe her spiritual presence was there, and And she said to me, I did my job. I got you here. I got you this far. The rest is up to you.
Wow.
And it lit a fire in me. Probably more than anything else. Because it brought it all full circle to me. So many times, she, when I was going through my crappy years, for lack of better words, but when I was going through all this stuff, so many times she would say, I've given you back to God. I'm giving you back to God. And, and I think of all of the sacrifices and all of the work and all of the 2 and 3 and 4 jobs that she worked and everything else for us to make it. And for her to say, I got you here, I finished my race.
Wow.
I run my course. And you were what God wanted from me.
Wow.
Now don't blow it.
I could hear your mom saying that.
I really believe it was kind of one of those things for me, and it was don't blow it.
Wow.
Kind of things. And yeah.
So you changed after that.
Yeah, I think I did.
You were in ministry then.
Yeah.
And so it's just that just was I've never heard that. You've never told that.
I don't know that I've told anyone that story till today.
But what an awesome.
You had to ask.
What an awesome. Well, that's my job. Pull it out.
You did. You did.
That's good stuff. Well, when you think about the 3-day significance, and so was Lazarus hanging around, or was that just I
don't know. You can believe what you want on that. The significance of the 4th day was the fact that those 3 days were gone.
All right.
The 3 days that the Jews, for those that don't know what we're talking about, the Jews believed, it was a Jewish custom to believe that that's why they would rush them to the tomb so quickly. Because they had to be entombed within 24 hours,
yeah,
and they would rush them to the tomb because they believed that once entombed, that the spirit would then dwell around the grave place, the burial place, for up to 3 days, and allowing the potential for resurrection. So once the 4th day comes, the opportunity of resurrection was gone.
Wow.
In their mind, in their mind. There was no opportunity for this to happen. Right? Except Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this was, going back to your original question, I think this was the groaning level of Jesus. I mean, we see it in his words to Martha and then to Mary. I am the resurrection. Right? And I don't believe that was a pat on the back kind of, I am the resurrection. I think it was a whoa. Shush.
Right.
I think it was a major shush moment from Jesus. I am the resurrection. I hold all of this in my hand.
Yeah.
And I need you to believe that. I need you to be willing to step into that depth of spirituality.
That goes to the next question. What do you know? And this is the question that you asked us. I'm not asking you this, but this is one of the questions, and I thought this was very intriguing for me, is what do you know about the authoritative example of Jesus Christ? Walking in the authority that Jesus let me give you 2 parts here. So what do we know about the authoritative example of Jesus Christ? And then the second thing is, if the church really knew how we could walk in the authority of Jesus Christ, would we be doing all this counseling that we're doing?
No.
Would we be doing
No.
marriage seminars? Would
No.
we be doing this?
Wouldn't need to.
And why?
because we'd be walking in the example of Christ. We'd be thinking like him. We'd be walking like him. We would be doing the things that he does. I mean, think how revolutionary it would be if the church, I'm not talking about sinners, if the church would walk in that authoritative example of Christ that God gave us in the Word, and the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us. It is the full authority of God culminated in the life of Jesus Christ. And, if we don't get anything else, we need to get the life of Jesus Christ, and how important it is for us to do that. I had, not to keep bringing it up, but I had someone ask me my opinions on The Chosen the other day. And we bring that up so much. They need to involve us in their things, right? Because we're all the time talking about it. I said, look, I agree. There's some liberties, there's some things that I don't know that I fully 100% believe happened.
Because none of us were there.
Or agree with,
Yeah.
right? But the same as I have my interpretation of the surroundings, they have their interpretation of the surroundings, and I'm willing to forgive that because they get Jesus right.
Yes.
It is the first thing I've seen in my life, other than the Passion of Christ, where someone gets Jesus right.
Yeah.
They get him right. They get the authoritative example of Jesus right.
Mm-hmm.
In that show, at least thus far.
Right.
And that is worth the watch. And also why I think we're seeing these things today. John, I believe with all of my heart, and you can say preachers have said this for decades, and maybe we have, but I believe the war on the church, forget the war on the world's lost, right?
Yeah.
The world's always going to be lost, right? But the war on the church, the people in the church who want what they want, regardless of the cost, regardless of what the word says, regardless of anything else, I just want what I want, and I'm going to take my bat and go home and pout if I don't get it. That mentality in the church is warfare in a deeply spiritual level, and it's happening on a level in the churches today that is unreal.
Yeah.
People taking their bags and going home because they want what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, we studied the 7 churches of Revelations last year, because I think God was almost prophesying in that series to us that, you know what, we're getting ready to see it.
All right.
And you know what, since then we have seen it. We've seen the Jezebel spirits raise up. We've seen the I don't know. It's semantics, but I'll call it this: the prosperity gospel issues have risen up, and I don't believe in a prosperity gospel with limousines and $1 million mansions in 5 or 6 different places and Lear jets and all of that. I do not believe God is in that or for that at all. I do believe in a God of plenty.
Sure.
And I do believe in a God that if you do the things he asks you to do, then he will reward us with spiritual prosperity that will ultimately lead us to good decisions that allow us to live a good life.
Yes.
That doesn't mean a rich, overbearing, millionaire, billionaire mindset life, whatever that looks like or is, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't, if that's the case, we're going to have to apologize to Jesus, and we're going to have to apologize to a whole lot of other people because they certainly didn't live it. I don't see any of the apostles living high on the hog, right? And if that were true, I think it would have been built in them, and we would have seen an example of that, and we certainly didn't. So I know we all kind of think of prosperity gospel different, and it has different meaning to each of us. So that's what I mean when I say that.
I think one of the things that bugs me with that is you're standing in front of a service, and you're like this, like I am. I've never put a gratuity on going to preach. You never have either, and a lot of this stuff. And I've never gone up in front of people and say, okay, if 5 people will give me $1,000, then God will bless you.
Or send me $20 and I'll give you a pair of cloth. I mean,
and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about.
You need a prayer cloth, I'll send you a prayer cloth.
Yeah, we'll send you one. Free of charge.
Yes.
Yeah, so
I'll pay the postage.
I get it. I understand what you're saying. And you're exactly right. When it comes to when you
Did we answer that question?
Yes.
Okay.
When it comes to authoritative, I looked that up. Able to be trusted.
Yeah.
Is what that means. So you think about this. And I want to say something else that goes along with this. If we did, now think of this, if we did the things that the people in the church did and that they get away with it, they would want our head on a block and kick us to the curb, would they not?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
If we did those things. Rightfully so.
But on our side, we're dealing with trying to get them better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is people tell on themselves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like someone's like, are you going to let them get by with that? They're saying this. They're saying that. They're posting this on Facebook. Nah. Give it time. They'll tell on themselves.
Yeah.
Give it time. They'll show the world
who they are,
what they're trying to cover, and what they're trying to make me look bad so that they don't look bad themselves.
Right.
It'll all be seen.
Right.
It'll all be seen.
Yeah.
And I've seen God do that. I've seen God relentlessly. Satan doing everything he can to use it to make the church look bad or to make me, or not even me sometimes, just other preachers.
Sure.
In churches I've been at where I'm not the guy. And everyone's just handling it right spiritually. I don't need to defend myself. God will defend me.
Yeah.
I've believed that for years.
And he does.
No, you're attacking me? Well, okay. Probably going to have to deal with God with that sooner or later because I don't have time.
Right.
I don't have time. I have people wanting to grow.
Right. And those are people concentrating.
I have people wanting to consecrate their sins. I have people wanting to draw closer to Jesus. So that's where I'm going to focus my heart. That's where I'm going to focus my energies. You want to badmouth me, you'll deal with God. Because I just don't have time.
Because we work for him.
Yep. And so people normally tell on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, people get so upset. You're not going to defend that? You're not going to? No.
All right.
Nah. I have more important things to do.
Yeah, gosh, if I would have tried to defend myself on anything that somebody said, I would have been busy doing that.
Yeah, right. And that's what Satan wants.
Yeah.
Satan wants us
distractions.
He wants us to have that fleshly entanglement. Because if we're having that fleshly entanglement, we're not battling on the spiritual level.
So
when those things come up, it's Satan saying, I can't handle you in the spirit, so I'm going to try to drag you down here into the flesh.
Yes.
And when we allow that to happen, guess what? Who wins? We might win the war of words, right? But ultimately, Satan wins because we're not focused on what we should be focused on.
That's good.
So, no, the Lord rebuke you. I'll move on with Jesus.
Yeah, I preached on Sunday a controlled spirit. That's what I preached. And the first line was out of our last podcast, and I quoted you on this. Christians are trying to live in the spirit that is controlled by the flesh. You said that 2 weeks ago in the podcast that we did, and that was my opening line of my sermon on Sunday.
Yep.
How true is that?
Very true.
And
I saw a Ravenhill, actually. I was in the shower this morning, and I was catching up on the news, and I saw a Ravenhill.
Leonard Ravenhill?
Yeah. Post. I can't even find it on my phone.
I'm not even going to ask you how you catch the news when you're in the shower. How do you do that? You got.
I have very specific apps that I go to that I trust. Is
your phone waterproof?
Not the radio. Actually, it is, but not the radio, not other things like that. But I'll jump there and catch headlines each morning. Just So I have an understanding of what's going on in the world before I step into the world that day. And also so I know what to pray for. And anyway, I saw this and I copied it and I took it to Facebook and posted it. And it says this. Here it is. It says, everyone wants to be clothed with power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is exactly what you're talking about, exactly what you're asking. Everyone wants to be clothed with power. Everyone wants a Pentecost. Everyone wants to claim the promises of Jesus that you'll do greater works than me. Everybody wants to claim it, right?
Yeah, know where you're going.
But no one wants to be stripped of self.
All right, pay the cost.
That's Ravenhill years ago, right? Dude's dead. So
pick up your cross.
This was a quote from forever ago. You got to deny yourself. If your gospel, and if your version of the gospel, and if your version of right and wrong has anything to do with self, and we live in this culture of self-love, self, yep. Right? And that's Satan selling a bill of goods. Jesus said from the very beginning,
yes.
If you want to follow after me, if you want to be mine, if you want to go to the deep places, if you want the power to accomplish all that you want to accomplish, if you want it, deny yourself.
Yeah.
You got to do that before you even get to the cross, man.
Yeah.
Right? Before you even pick up the cross, you got to deny yourself.
Isn't that the most enjoyable thing that you can do?
So that's the So that's the point of your point that you opened that sermon with, that there are a lot of people trying to walk in the Spirit,
right? But
they're trying to control it by the flesh, and the two just don't go hand in hand.
And you know the thing about it is, Jay, is if I stood here, or if I sat here across from you and looking at a camera, and said that I love denying myself. I love crucifying the flesh. You're going to look at me and say, you're out of your mind. I mean, who wants to do that? That's why it's called denying. That's why it's called, and look, sometimes your Christian life, your relationship with Jesus is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be. Sometimes
it needs to be.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to be tripping all over yourself because you're trying to get it right. The thing about it is, though, Pastor Jay, is that we have people that aren't even trying in this world.
Right. Yeah.
They're not even trying. You know, I mean, Scott Young, a buddy of mine that I went to school with, he said this one time. He said, try is failure with honors. And I never forgot that. But one thing that we got to think about this. I mean, are people putting any emphasis into this next statement? Do you see and understand, this is what you said in your sermon, do you see and understand your relationship with Jesus? It goes back to denying yourself, taking up your cross. Jesus said it. It was said in Romans, your cross, not his cross, your cross. Pick up your cross and carry it. And there's times that I look in the mirror and I'm thinking, are you ever going to get that right? You've got to get it right. And I look in the mirror and I say, John, you've got to get this right.
Yeah.
I tell myself that, because you keep tripping over yourself. And it's like, okay, I've got to get this right. I've got to walk in the authoritative power of Jesus Christ and be the example. And then it's amazing how God will help you. It really is. I mean, it's just amazing. I have never experienced a podcast like this before to where I can hardly breathe. I mean, there's been times in this thing, it's like, it's so thick in here that, it's like, whew, do you feel that? Or is it just me?
Yeah. No, I do.
Yeah, it's just powerful, powerful stuff.
Humbling.
Yeah, it really is. Your fruits is based on what you are presenting. That's one of the things that I thought we would close with. Your fruit is based on what you are presenting. So as we wind this down, what do you say about the fruit of the church or the fruit of the people? What is that?
Well, the Bible talks about fruits of the Spirit.
Yes,
right.
In Galatians,
those are very different than the fruits of service.
That's good.
Right? And so many of us think that the fruits of our service, right, the fruits of our work, the fruits of, of what we're doing and being seen doing those things, we confuse that as spiritual fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's just being a good spiritual person,
Right.
is serving and doing those types of things and embodying the service and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Ultimately, we're humbling ourselves to say, Jesus, when we think about humbling, man, Jesus leaving glory to come here, I mean, there's no greater sacrifice than that. Forget the cross. That
Yeah.
alone in itself was a huge sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So us serving
Mm-hmm.
is a humbling, denying flesh kind of thing, right? Because none of us like to mop floors. Anybody like to mop a floor?
I did that last night at our
I'd
house.
question your sanity if you like it.
On my hands and knees with a
Yeah.
cloth on
Yeah.
the floor.
Sam and I both have done that many times. And, her more than me, just being honest. But, none of us like serving in the hard and in the difficult and in the painful and frustrating things, right? It's not easy. And, if anyone says, I enjoy that level of it, you're lying.
Yeah, it's your mind.
But what we do enjoy is his presence and what he brings us to, because the more willing we are to deny ourselves,
Yeah.
the more spiritual we become, right? And so serving matters, right? Had a scenario a few weeks ago, and I was talking about this in men's group, no names, but was talking about that, where someone, striving for ministry, been prophesied over for ministry, and everything else, wanted a timeline basically on it. I'm like, look, only God holds the timeline for you on that. Only God knows that. So the best thing for you to do is to build relationships, right? Because you don't minister from a pulpit. You minister from relationships.
That's true.
Right? You minister from building relationships with people who need to hear what God is giving you to say.
That's what Jesus did.
Yeah, exactly what Jesus did. And if you're not building those relationships because you're pulpit minded, you're never going to get to the pulpit, because you're not creating the ground you need to create to properly form a pulpit, to properly form a place that you can minister from. Right? So you have to start building relationships. That's what Jesus did.
Yes.
Follow me. What did he do? He built the ground that he was ultimately ministering to. He ministered to thousands, but he was ultimately ministering to those 12. Right? Because he knew that they would build the church.
Yeah.
Right? What did he say? On this rock, the rock of my testimony, not Peter necessarily, but the rock of my testimony.
Right.
I'll build my church.
Yes.
Right? So what was he saying? He was saying, I have built these relationships with you.
Yes.
That you might carry on the work.
So
right?
Good.
And so if we're not making that investment, and if we're not willing to spend that time growing in ourselves, growing in our relationships and in our marriages and everything else, all biblical principles.
Yes.
To prepare ourselves for what God has ordained or prophesied for us.
Right.
We'll never get there.
Right.
We will never, ever, ever get there. Why? Because he doesn't want you in his pulpit.
Right.
He wants him in his pulpit. And so when we get nothing bothers me. I got a word. Well, I don't want your word.
Right.
I don't want your word.
Right.
Tell me the word God has.
Yes.
Right? But what do all the prophets say? I don't remember a single prophet saying, I got something.
Right.
I got something for you.
Right.
Right? No, what do the prophets say? I have heard from the Lord.
Right. Yes.
Oh, I can feel it. I have heard.
Yeah.
I have heard from the Lord.
It's good.
And this is what he says.
Yes.
This is what he says.
Right.
And when we step there
Yeah.
and we're willing to make the sacrifices to step into that place,
Yes.
that is when the power falls. Oh, I'm going to preach if you don't turn this thing off.
Feel heaven in here. There's a cost in walking with Jesus. My mentor told me that years ago. James Ashworth, he's in heaven now. He said, Brother John, you have to die out to the flesh. He says you got to give it all to Jesus.
Amen.
And so today, if you're that person that has been listening, tears running down your eyes, and say, I need Jesus, just ask him to forgive you. Ask him to forgive you of your sins. Just say, Father, come into my life. Live in my life. Use me for your kingdom, glory, and honor. And get in a Bible-believing church. God can do great things in you. And I tell you what, if you need a Bible, you text Jay or me, myself, and we'll send you one free of charge. And we'll bless you because you're such a blessing to us. God is so faithful, and we just appreciate you, Jesus. We thank you, God, for what you're doing in our lives and how you're blessing, how you're moving in these churches. And God, we just pray in the name of Jesus as Jesus Together continues, God, that you're going to do great things in this next sermon and the sermons after that. I pray for Pastor Jay just for revelation to come from heaven, that you'll use him in a mighty way. And God, we give you praise and give you honor for it in Jesus' name. Don't forget to download the app and make sure that you do that. Tell your friends about it. Share, like, and subscribe the podcast today. If you would like to give to this ministry, text the word PULSE to 1-304-244-3187. Go to thepulsechurch.com, give through PayPal, or mail your love gift to P.O. Box 561, Eleanor, West Virginia 25070. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching the Pulse WV Live, a network that beats to the heart of God.